The fourth Aliyah starts, V'deber Elohim el Noach lemor, Tzei min ha-teva ata v'ishtecha uvanecha v'mshei vanecha itach. God spoke to Noah saying, go forth from the ark. This is at the end of the story, but it's not the end of the story. It's just the unfolding of another chapter. Right? At this point, God has regretted having made everything. God has told Noah, we're gonna flood everything. Build an ark. Even though everyone's gonna think you're insane. Build an ark. Get 2 animals of everything, or maybe 2 and 7. When you read 7 of the kosher animals, 2 of the non-kosher animals. Get them into the ark. It rains, eventually it floods, and then the waters recede. And God spoke to Noah saying, go forth from the ark, you and your wife and your sons' wives with you. Bring forth with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, both bird and cattle and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, that they may swarm in the earth and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. And Noah went forth, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him, every beast and every creeping thing and every bird, whatsoever moves upon the earth, after their families went forth out of the ark. So they come out of the ark. And then we read in the next Aliyah, and God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, as for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you, and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the bird, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, all that go out of the ark, even every beast of the earth. And I will establish my brit, my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of the flood. Neither shall there be any more a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the token. This is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I have set what? What is the sign of this covenant? A rainbow. I have set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass when I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the cloud, that I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. So, a covenant. And, by the way, what is the blessing for seeing a rainbow? You know that there are blessings for all sorts of things, right? There is a tradition that you should say, every Jew should say 100 blessings every day. 100 blessings. You're a blessing producer, a blessing maker. That's what we do. We go through the day, all day, making blessings. And so we're part of the universe praising God all the time. Of course, if you daven 3 times a day, you've already said lots of blessings. So then you add a few more for things that you happen to appreciate. It's not only blessings before eating or blessings after eating, but it's also blessings when you see different things. Like, ha'oseh ma'aseh breshit, blessed, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, ha'oseh ma'aseh breshit, which I translate, blessed are you, God, ruler of the universe, who creates the creations of creation. That's basically, who creates the creations of creation, who creates the deeds of Bereshit, the beginning. The blessing for seeing a rainbow. Well, I should say some of these blessings are pretty straightforward. Like, blessed are you, sovereign of all worlds, who made the great sea. You say that when you see the ocean. But the blessing for seeing a rainbow. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, zocher habrit v'ne'eman bevrito v'kayam b'ma'amaro. Blessed are you who remembers the covenant, remains faithful to it, and fulfills its word. We're reminded that the rainbow is a symbol of a covenant. So in our society, I think maybe the conservatives should be embracing a rainbow. I mean, instead of criticizing liberals for having rainbows all the time. The rainbow is a biblical symbol. And the rabbis insist that if there is a covenant, there also must be mitzvot, commandments connected to the covenant. The covenant is with whom? The covenant is between God and all human and animal life. All life, actually. But that also means that every person is part of this covenant. That within the scope of Jewish thought, we have our own covenant with God, but we're not the only ones with a covenant with God. In fact, every people on earth participates in a covenant with God. Every human being participates in a covenant with God. And if that is the case, then what are the mitzvot that are incumbent upon every human being? And those 7 Noahide mitzvot are no murder, no robbery, no incest, no idolatry, no blasphemy, no eating meat cut from a living animal, and 2, establish courts of justice. The eating meat cut from a living animal may seem like a really strange one to add there, but if you imagine having a sizable animal, more than can be eaten at once, and there's no refrigeration, how are you going to preserve all that meat? Maybe one way is just to cut off a little bit at a time. Pretty cool. Now, in accordance with Rabbinic Judaism, we would say that Jews have 613 mitzvot. Non-Jews have 7 mitzvot. Now, unlike many other religions, this needs to be pointed out then, one of the implications here, unlike many other religions, we don't teach that everyone has to be like us. We don't teach that everyone has to be Jewish. There are other religions that teach that we really need to be just like us, or just like them. We don't teach that. We do believe that everyone has an obligation to be righteous. And these mitzvot form a Torah basis for a universal definition of righteousness. I would say is just as we, and I say we, I mean liberal Jews, just as we in our own approach to Judaism are not literalists or fundamentalists in our approach to what our mitzvot are, so also in our approach to what is righteous, we also do not need to be literalists or fundamentalists. We can ask, what do these mitzvot mean? What do these 7 mitzvot mean in a larger sense that can help us understand universalistic values that can be a basis for righteousness? In other words, we can ask not necessarily what are the 7 mitzvot, but we can ask what are the Noahide values? What are the values of the Noahide covenant rather than the laws? And summarizing some of my thinking deriving from these mitzvot, I see that righteousness involves ultimate concern for the value of human life and dignity. That's reflected in the command, do not murder. Also, respect the property rights of others, not to steal from them, no robbery. That would include what the rabbis called gnivat da'at, theft of the mind, deception and manipulation. Also, under this category of ultimate concern for the value of human life and dignity, sexual morality. That's no murder, no robbery, no incest. Ultimate concern for the value of human life and dignity. Ultimate concern for justice. There is this mitzvah to establish courts of justice. It's one of the 7 Noahide mitzvot, one of the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach. That's one that is actually derivative of all the others. The rabbis derive the first 6 from the text itself and then say, well, if anyone's going to be punished for violating any of these, then there have to be courts of justice. So one of the mitzvot incumbent upon every people on earth, according to the rabbis, is that they must establish courts of justice. Another aspect or value that derives from these is ultimate concern for compassion that extends not only to humans but to animals, plants, and the natural world around us. That's what I see in this mitzvah, not to eat meat from torn animals. Ultimately, a value of compassion and concern that extends beyond human beings to animals and plants in the natural world. No idolatry. What is that? And how can we claim to apply that beyond ourselves to everybody? And to me, no idolatry means do not approach spiritual understanding with a sense of arrogance, but rather with humility. Do not turn a no God into God, including any physical or intellectual image that you might have of God. So more to the point, if you have an idea in your head of what God is, that's not God. If you have this idea in your head of what God is, that's not God. Do not think that you absolutely know what God is and therefore that you can impose your view upon everyone else. That is why we do not teach that everyone has to be like us. At least in my opinion, that's why we do not teach that everyone has to be like us, because that would be idolatrous for us to say that we have this image of God. And the image of God that we have is God. Also, to those who try to proselytize us, do not be so arrogant as to say you know more about us that you know more than us about what God is in our lives. And then, no blasphemy. How do we apply that beyond ourselves? What does it mean to avoid blasphemy? And my thought is, do not say that God affirms the ultimate value of wickedness and violence. Do not accept hatred and violence in the name of God. That is blasphemous. And I will include in that, do not separate the God of Israel from the Torah of Israel and the people of Israel. Do not justify physical or spiritual violence against us as Jews because you believe we should be something other than we are. So these come down, in my mind, to what we read in the prophet Micah. What does God want of you, O human? Do justly, love compassion, and walk humbly with your God. Walk, so that means the way you live. Humbly, do not be arrogant, with your God, with God as you understand God, knowing that other people are going to have other understandings. To me, this is a basis for universalistic values. Now, as Jews, we also hold particularistic values. This is always a tension for everyone, for all peoples, because it's never possible to be Mr. or Mrs. Universal. We each are always someone in particular. So we need to hold to both particular values and universalistic values. I often define Judaism and Torah life as a universalistic path of a particular people. Judaism is a universalistic path of a particular people. We strive to uphold universalistic values and we do so in our own particular way. And as such, also, we are obligated to help sustain our own community and our own way of life and way of being, in addition to caring about the larger world. I believe this is true of all peoples everywhere. As someone who has been involved for decades in interfaith dialogue and interfaith-based advocacy, I see the world in all its cultural and religious diversity as a beautiful, colorful tapestry. And in this tapestry, each religious and cultural tradition in the world is a thread of color, contributing to the spiritual and religious cultural beauty of the entire whole. And each religious, spiritual, and cultural community, therefore, has an obligation to the world to see to it that their own particular thread of color shines brightly in the tapestry in order to enhance the beauty of that entire tapestry. So our universalistic and particularistic obligations merge. All of humanity has an obligation to strive towards righteousness, to be the best human beings we each can be. Jews have an obligation to build up Jewish community and Torah in order to be the best Jews we can be, as our particular way of being the best human beings that we can be. And others can find for themselves, without us having to define who they are, their own cultural and religious spiritual ways of contributing to the overall beauty of the world by being the best human beings they can be in their own way. And so now at this point, I do want to mention the death this week of a Jewish teacher who strove for most of his life to walk this tension that we all hold. And I'm talking about Rabbi Arthur Waskow, who died this week. Rabbi Arthur Waskow, who I think maybe he even said of himself, but it certainly has been said of him, he was a Jewish radical who became a radical Jew. I knew him from the time when he operated the Shalom Center on the third floor of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. He was, as a Jewish radical, in the days of being a Jewish radical, he was deeply involved in the civil rights era protests. He was directly involved in the effort, I don't even remember all the right words, I think it was one of the southern states where they created an alternative Democratic Party and went to the Democratic Convention to get themselves seated, as opposed to the Democratic Party that, was it Georgia or Mississippi? Probably Mississippi. Huh? The Dixiecrats were something else entirely. No. They created a it paralyzed the Democratic Convention in 1964 for a while, because these political activists showed up at the Democratic Convention insisting that they were the rightful delegation from that state, and it took President Johnson to intervene so he was part of that. He was clearly part of the protests around the Vietnam War and later around Latin America, and democracy around the world, environmentalism. He supported the two-state solution long before it was acceptable to talk about. His academic studies were in economics. He advocated economics that values human dignity first. He introduced things in some of his books, especially as he moved from a Jewish radical to being a radical Jew, introduced things that some of you have heard of. He wrote a book called The Freedom Seder, which introduced that title to that name into the Jewish world. He wrote a book called God Wrestling, which I think the drash that he was based on might have been first introduced in the modern Jewish community by Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, but he wrote this entire book about, based on this drash about Jacob wrestling with an angel and becoming renamed Israel. That's God wrestler, and our role is to be God wrestlers, to be constantly wrestling with God in order to better learn about God, to maybe somewhere get a glimpse of God's face somehow. If he didn't introduce, he certainly popularized this idea of saying Yah. That's God. It was as blessed are you, Yah, Baruch atah, Yah, emphasizing breath. God is the breath of all being. He wrote a book called Seasons of Our Joy about the various different seasons, different Jewish holidays, and he was very active in interfaith activism. He started the Shalom Center, was very involved in the renewal movement. In these ways, he strove to live his life striving to contribute to the betterment of the entire world through the way he strove to build up Jewish life. Rabbi Waskow set an example for all of us in this way. And we here at Temple Beth Shalom, as I keep on coming back to, I don't want to talk to everything outside the walls. I want to come back in. We here have an opportunity to follow suit in some way. We are a small but visible part of a diverse community around us, a diverse community that does see us, actually. We are seen. Even here, right here in Mechanicsburg, we are seen. And the garden that we are planting will expand that. The dialogue and learning that can emerge out of that visibility will expand that. Some of you know that the KKK asserted itself in Mechanicsburg this week. At a Halloween gathering, and when these children came home with all their Halloween treasures, parents found cards in it from women of the KKK. Thankfully, the Mechanicsburg Borough Council, which was meeting just 2 days later, reacted strongly to this. Local clergy are organizing a response and various opportunities for follow-up, which we'll talk about during announcements. The dedication of our peace pole may likely become part of that follow-up response. The ADL reached out to me as a result of this, and so ADL offices in Philadelphia now want to send a little delegation to our dedication here regarding the Peace Garden. So also may Interfaith Alliance of Pennsylvania. I actually heard about this issue with the KKK. I didn't notice it in the paper till the ADL called. And then I called some of the other ministers and found out they were trying to figure out how to reach me and how to reach us. So there's good things that will come out of this because it's bringing us together. As long as we respond that way, because we respond, it brings us together. So there will be a response by the community put together by the clergy. Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission has reached out and probably will be doing something following that. We'll publicize what we're doing over here, and then that will lead to the Thanksgiving interfaith service. So there should be more momentum. But the point is, though, they didn't know how to reach out to us, but they knew about us. We were seen. They wanted our involvement. Additionally, this week, the Jewish community of Harrisburg had a joint commemoration marking 2 years since October 7th, 2023. We are in an important moment of hope in the Middle East, where maybe hope against hope, some new direction may emerge, hope against hope. But we can be certain, for reasons that we can discuss later, that attacks against our community nonetheless will continue. Actual physical attacks, and also attacks through the ways that the events of the last 2 years are characterized and contextualized. Simultaneously, we can see also that ways in which some of our own global Jewish community will advocate around these issues will also challenge some of our commitments to universalistic values. We can see that already. There is much need for discussion and learning around what I might call an invitation to what Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, called a new Zionism. An invitation to a new Zionism. For 2 years, I've been hoping maybe some leaders in this community might find a way to do that in some way, issue that in some way, in some language, an invitation to a new Zionism. Maybe it's something that we should do. Just invite people together to begin to envision a new Zionism on the basis of what Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan talked about, and also networking with other people who are thinking the same thing. Earlier this year, the Harrisburg Jewish community created a partnership with the municipal council in the Negev desert region of Israel. Part of the reason that municipality was chosen was because of its diversity. So there's people for us to connect with. But also there are other people in the American Jewish community, other groups to think about connecting with, and people in this community who want more of a voice, who want more of a connection. We have an opportunity to define ourselves in relation to these issues in ways that can help define the issues for others and help move the world towards a vision of a more beautiful tapestry suggested by the conclusion of the story of Noah that we read in this week's Parsha. So let us continue to talk, discuss, learn, and invite others to learn with us. Shabbat Shalom.